Hi, how are you? How are you all doing? I've been wanting to record this video about bicycle brands that, in my opinion, are completely underrated. Brands recognized within the industry by professionals, including distributors, shops, riders, experts, and testers. They do have a good reputation among professionals, but for one reason or another, they don't get the recognition they deserve from the general public or the end customer, at least in my opinion. When we think of big brands, what always comes to my mind is what I call the Big Four specialized trek. Cannondale, Scott, which nowadays I think we should call the Big Five, with the addition of Canyon, because in recent years they've been going full throttle, doing a really good job. I think that's why it's the Big Five. On the other hand, we have prestigious Italian brands such as Colnago, Pinarello, Willier Bianchi, and so on. And then there are many other brands, maybe smaller, more niche, each within their own discipline, like Uno, Yeti, Santa Cruz, Cervelo, Open, and so on, and so on. But there are certain brands that aren't necessarily smaller than the ones we've mentioned before, that have been doing things very well lately, but maybe still don't enjoy that recognition from the general public. To put together this list, which by the way isn't really a list, it's not a ranking, it's not going from best to worst or worst to best. It's simply a mention of 4 brands that I consider underrated within the industry by the general public. And I'll give you my arguments for each of them, since I've taken several factors into consideration for each one. Maybe there's one that stands out for commercial reasons, another that stands out for the development of their bikes, another for their push in marketing and branding that they're doing, or a little bit of everything. I'll tell you more as we go along. Also taking into account both the public and private tests I've done with each of the bikes from those brands and from other brands. When I say public and private tests, I mean public ones. Then they're the ones you see when I create content and they show up on Strava with mileage and so on. And the private ones are the ones I do completely privately without creating content, with certain bikes out of curiosity to know how they work and so on. These tests not only give me the ability to understand how the bike works, how it rides, its pros and cons, but also to get to know each of the companies a little better from the inside. How does it work in terms of logistics, in terms of communication? What is it like dealing with the staff behind the logo and so on? So I've put all of this on a sort of scale to come up with what I'm telling you. Let me make it clear that under no circumstances do the brands that appear in this video, well, I don't know, either they've paid or I don't know. Whatever you might think about this video being sponsored or whatever, no, it's not. It's completely independent. There are brands that, in quotes, I wanted to highlight because I think they deserve it and they're not getting all the recognition they deserve. And that's simply it, nothing more. It's an independent video, like many others you can find on this channel. That being said, it might be interesting. And would you guys like me to make a video about overrated bicycle brands, just like I'm making a video about underrated bicycle brands? That one might be a bit more controversial for me to make, but hey, if you like the idea, please let me know in the comments if you'd like me to go ahead with that video. To mention a few brands that I personally think are overrated by the general public, by the end customer. You know, if you like the channel, if you like the content, hit the subscribe button, give it a big like, and you'll help me grow the project. That being said, let's go with the first brand. Megamo, I'd like to highlight the momentum from Megamo in branding that they've given the brand in recent years. The restyling they've done to all their bikes in all their categories. Just 5 years ago, Megamo faced a huge challenge, which was to separate the brand name from entry-level, low-priced bike models, so that we all understand. To do this, they redesigned their logo, changed the brand image and all of their products. I think all of this started with the development or the launch of the new cross-country track, which was a huge change in the catalog of the brand here in Girona. In a short time, they went from selling open mold frames with hardly any personality and in some cases obsolete. I remember the previous track, which at times competed against bikes that were way ahead. Most importantly, not only technically, but also in personality. They had a very strong personality, and the previous track was a bit lacking in comparison. Empty, like a bike that's more cushioned, vertical maybe. However, they did a remodel of all the categories. And the truth is that now you take a look at Megamo's catalog and it's a huge change. Models like the track itself with 120 millimeters, the Silk, which is the fast gravel, the competition one with very sleek lines, the new road bike they've launched, right? I don't know, they've really caught up quickly in all the categories. It's a bit complicated, especially in these past years with COVID, chaos in the factories and everything else. So I think it's something really worth appreciating. And all of this while keeping very competitive prices for what we're experiencing nowadays. And you have to add, for example, their involvement with the Buff Megamo team, the former Buff Scott, which now, for the past few years, has been Buff Megamo, which has achieved victories in the Cape Epic. I mean, something epic, no pun intended, for a brand of that caliber. Understand me, compared to the giants of the industry, Megamo is so small, so has the change been incredible? Personally, Megamo gives me the feeling of being like Orbea was 10 years ago, and I mean that in a very positive way. Orbea right now has taken 2 or 3 steps up, it's in a different place probably, but Megamo right now is that bike brand that if you're a shop owner, it makes a lot of sense to have. It's a lot of, if you already have a Scott or a Trek in your shop as a top brand, and then you need someone to fill all the ranges in terms of price variety, in terms of category variety, with very competitive prices, but as I always say, with bikes that have an attractive look and builds with prices that are competitive. Because in the end, that's where you have a person, a user who is willing to spend 15,000 euros, a little more than 15,000 euros, for a top-of-the-line model in a Scott Spark. You're going to have a much higher percentage of customers who are willing to buy it. Well, a Megamo track with 120 millimeters for 7,000 euros, 8,000 euros, which is already a very, very competitive machine in terms of weight, etc., etc. So I especially highlight this brand for the work they've done in rebranding, reinventing themselves, and marketing. I think it's a key brand. A challenge for them. Probably being able to cover, especially within the domestic market, since it's all about the country's expansion, because maybe it's a brand that does focus a lot or is very much associated with Catalonia, with Girona. And I don't know to what extent it's able to reach every corner of the peninsula or Spain, but well, there is always room for improvement. Second very interesting brand, Enve. I have to admit that when I saw the news a few years ago about Enve, a prestigious wheel brand that's been around forever, was going to start marketing and manufacturing their own bicycle frames, I felt a chill run through my body, like a shock, because that's normal. What we had seen until now was that big bicycle brands like Specialized with Roval, Canon with Hologram, Trek with Bontrager, well, they had dedicated themselves precisely to that, to launching those bicycle brands, their own component brands, including wheels and these brands, everything. With their current strength and momentum, as a bicycle brand, they have never quite managed to get their products to be sold separately from the bicycle itself. A lot of Specialized bikes come with Roval, a lot of Trek bikes come with Bontrager, many Cannondale bikes come standard with Hologram, or Scott with Synchros. But it's very rare to see people using a Bontrager on a bike that's not a Trek, or Hologram wheels on a bike that's not a Cannondale. So just imagine doing the reverse process, the having wheels and trying to get people to buy bikes with that logo. So at first I was a bit skeptical, but I have to admit that as soon as I got on their bikes last year in 2024, I was able to try 2 of their models, and wow, trying the bikes made me understand everything. Well, it's also true that the distributor in Spain, with whom I have a very good relationship, explained to me the whole plan behind the development before it was born. The bicycle brand, let's say, of Enve, and the thing is that Enve had already been designing and manufacturing frames for third-party brands at their facilities. They already possessed the expertise, procedures, and knowledge to accomplish it. They had only produced frames with their own logo. Tesla had a clear, well-defined strategy, which is now evident with their complete catalog of 3 models years later. Because first they released the Melee for road, then they released the Mach for gravel. Lastly, they lacked the central gap, the old road. They released it relatively recently, just a few months ago, and with that, they now have the entire range. They had the whole roadmap ready before they started. And always bringing interesting things to a world that seems like it can't have any more innovation because it's already very mature. Like the world of road bikes or their descendants in road and gravel. Like, for example, super generous tire clearance. They were among the first, they already came out with tire clearance. Much greater, much more generous than what was already being offered by other brands. That combination of a very tall head tube with a very low bottom bracket also allows you to have a position on top of the bike in its 3 models. Very comfortable, but at the same time, it gives you excellent cornering. And in general, those geometries are very compact with wheelbases as short as possible. Combined, as I said, with that high head tube that makes Enve bikes very, very playful. And I don't know, for me, it's already hard to innovate and come up with something disruptive. When you're a brand that's been developing things for years to appear, quote unquote, from scratch, even though you've been making things for third parties for years to appear from scratch. To shake up the market like Enve has done. Not in terms of units sold, but rather, let's say, in the concept brought to the table, brought to the consumer. I find it very interesting and I wanted to highlight it. Let's move on to the third brand, BH. This is a brand I want to highlight for the advanced development of its bicycles. They are packed with technology and good ideas. The Lynx family in cross-country exemplifies my point about flip pivot systems. Simply outstanding tool integration systems and highly refined geometries. If we talk about road bikes, polished aerodynamics, integration that has been very well developed for a long time, they've always been on par with the big brands. Every time I get on a BH, no matter the discipline, the same thought always comes to my mind. With how well these bikes perform, how is it possible that you don't see more of them in the mountains or on the roads? I'm convinced this is the typical example of a brand that if it were Swiss or American, simply because of the detail of its country of origin, it would already be perceived by the public as a much more dangerous bike. Being a national brand might actually be a burden. In this sense, it's also true that until very recently, BH had models with very high performance, but aesthetically they were a step behind, probably compared to some bikes from the competition. But recently, they've significantly improved in that area. And for example, the latest launch of the Lynx Space Launch System is a clear example of that. It's a very aesthetically attractive bike. But is it really a brand that, being a national brand, which we almost always have to mention as a drawback instead of something in its favor? They have an incredible bike development. And I'm convinced that if they had a different logo, those features and those bikes would be much more admired. And finally, Van Risso, which I think is from Caldon. In general, it's the ultimate symbol of an underrated bike or bike brand. I'll focus on just one decathlon brand, not Rock Rider. I've tried the 2 flagship models, both from Van Ryser, the RCR, and from Rock Rider, the 940S. But in this case, I think the RCR is way ahead, at least on par with the rest of the World Tour competitors from other brands, other bikes that other teams might use. Whereas the 940S might be a little further behind compared to the rest of the competitor bikes in the Mountain Bike World Cup. I'll focus on the RCR. And well, I think Decathlon has done some things really well. They've managed to take a step forward with the RCR product. Amazing. I mean, a leap that takes other brands entire generations of products to achieve. That aspect, Carlon has achieved it in one leap. They've developed an incredible product. They've positioned their bikes as some of the best in aerodynamic coefficient within the World Tour peloton. And the results are there. 2024. If you're aware of what Carlon's AG2R has done, It's been incredible in terms of the number of victories and so on. Top products, super competitive price. Great results in the World Tour, but it's still not enough for many cyclists who still see it as a so-called rookie brand. In this sense, Ian De Carlon and his marketing department have a big challenge ahead to change the public's perception of Van Rysel from being seen as a weekend warrior brand, I'm quoting here with all due respect, to becoming a performance brand with some pedigree. The truth is, it's going to be tough. And probably the strategy they should follow involves making a clear separation between the Carlon brand and the Van Rysel brand. In fact, they're already putting this into practice, not just saying it. For some time now, Van Rysel, not Carlon, but Van Rysel has had a showroom, its own store in the center of London, where social rides are organized, where presentations are held, where you can buy all Van Rysel products, but you can't buy any Carlon products. It's something unique and exclusive to Van Rysel. Although the conflict may feel distant for those in Spain and other countries, it's a real issue that I guess they're doing something like a pilot program in London. But if they manage to export this marketing format to each of the countries where they have a presence, it will probably be the way to go, because nowadays you can have a great price, a product with great performance, and so on. But people, the end customers, are looking for a sense of belonging to a group, to a brand, not just buying a product at a good price. And that's probably Decathlon's weakest point right now, but they're already working on it, they're already developing it, so it'll be interesting to see what path they gradually take with Van Rysel. Anyway, these are my contributions, these are my arguments. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section if you agree with me about these 4 brands, or if you think there's another brand that you believe is underrated. In general, is there any reason why the general public feels this way? And that's it. If you also want to see a video about overrated brands, let me know in the comments as well. Be very happy, and I'll see you in the next videos. Bye-bye.